Do it. Oh, yeah, sorry. Ready?
All right.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fuel the Fight podcast. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Nick Barringer, your host. Have a special guest today, a great officer, a great soldier, a great dietitian, and most of all, my friend, Lieutenant Colonel Joetta Khan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. It's always great to reconnect with old friends and to talk a little bit about nutrition.
Yeah, we're going to talk about nutrition today, and I do want to start off to go back our history. 2004, I think it was. So we both did then the internship, it was the consortium.
U.S. Military Consortium.
So you had the Air Force, you had everybody else. She was at the second best one at Walter Reed. I was at the best one at Brookhaven Medical Center.
I will argue that point that Walter Reed was definitely the best site.
Agreed
to disagree.
It continues to be. But anyway, so now you're the interim program director for the master's program in nutrition, which is exciting because I think it was 2 years ago, I was here with Major Michelle Stone, and we were talking about transitioning to this program.
Yes.
Now here we are. We've got our second cohort?
Exactly. So we transitioned last January as we were transitioning out the legacy program, the legacy graduate program of nutrition, which was our phase 1, phase 2, which was all didactic here, and then they went off to their internship sites, which we'll kind of lose that rivalry from those internship sites. And then we got our first class coming in last January. So we've just finished up about 1 year of our inaugural program with our inaugural cohort, and we onboarded our second cohort. So we're in that second class now.
Nice. What has been the most challenging? Because you've been, you've got your hands dirty in this process in terms of you got here, you went right in as far as adjusting to this future education model. Can you talk, a little bit about the future education model, and then, what has been the biggest challenges you faced, and then kind of the rewards?
Oh, absolutely. So I think it's important to establish what the old program was and what the new program is. And so under the old program, our students came here to Fort Sam Houston. They did about 9 months of didactic instruction, which was a heavy load. They were doing about 52 credit hours during that 9-month time. So it was really drinking from a fire hose in terms of the education piece. Then they would leave here and they would come out to the internship sites. I was an internship site director and the research director out there for about 5 years at Walter Reed. Hence why I also think Walter Reed's the best. And so they would show up, and it was very obvious that some of those knowledge pieces didn't stick. And so we spent a lot of time doing their supervised practice, their internship, reteaching some of those key concepts. So a few years ago, the Academy decided that this future education model was kind of the way to go. And so with that, they started to embed the student experiential learning, or what we formerly called the supervised learning, into the didactic instruction piece. So we've revamped our program. It's now fully here at Fort Sam Houston for 2 years. So our students are here for 24 months. They still drink from a fire hose a little bit. We're up to about 66 credit hours. However, those are spread out over a 2-year period. And additionally, our students complete those 1,350 supervised hours throughout the semester. So one of the key changes for our students is they're here about 6 weeks in their year 1, and then they're out to one of those learning sites. So they're learning those concepts, and then they're applying them or observing them much earlier in the process. I would say some of the key challenges coming in were, one, we're reorganizing. And so with reorganizing and development of a new program, you have to develop new content, new curriculum. The Academy has new requirements for the new program that we have to teach, some advanced training. In the past, dietitians did not insert NG tubes. That's an advanced skill that they're looking to implement, swallow studies, those sort of things. So we've had to look at how we can revitalize our curriculum to incorporate those things. Additionally, staffing has been a challenge. Anytime you're talking about large military reorganization, we still have to deal with permanent change of station cycles, and some of our good staff leaves, then we get new staff in. We have to train them to be as good as the good staff that left. So that's been a really big challenge. Additionally, we were phasing out our legacy program. So when I arrived here, we still had 2 classes that were part of that legacy program. So basically, we're running 2 programs with staffing equivalent of 1. So that's been a really big challenge over the last few years. Our staffing went down to 3. We really need about 9 to 13 with our administrative staff to run this program. especially in this establishment phase. So we went down to about 3 during that PCS cycle. Now we're back up to about 7, and just working to get everybody trained so we can continue to move this process forward.
Nice. You talked about some of the challenges and the changes, but one of the things that highlighted, and Major Stone and I talked about this previously, but we've opened up the aperture as far as the students that we come in. Can you talk a little bit about how that's changed the structure and the type of students we're seeing coming into the program?
Oh, absolutely. So as I said, I was part of the internship program for 5 years. And really our students were focused on nutrition, right? So they came from nutrition backgrounds. Everybody had an undergraduate degree in nutrition. Everybody had gotten that DPT verification statement from the academy. So they were really all thinking along the same lines, which is expected, right? That's what we teach them in those education courses. Under the new model, the reason why we've expanded to 66 credit hours is because there are components that we're willing to teach. So we say these students have to come in with about 27 different credits that get their foot in the door. And then once they're here, we're going to teach them everything else they would normally get as part of that bachelor's program to complete the requirements for the master's. So what that has allowed us to do is to take any student with a bachelor's degree from an accredited university. So this means a student can come in with a psychology degree or a business degree or an exercise physiology degree, and we will teach them the foundational skills that they need to go on to complete the master's program and get a master's in nutrition and then sit for their internship. Now, coming from my experience at phase 2 in that 5 years, it has really changed the dialogue within the classroom. So these students are bringing diverse backgrounds. We have students that are returning students. So they've been out there, they've done a full career, and now they're coming back in. About 50% of our cohort is former military. So they've done a variety of military skills. So they're bringing that back in. They've been in the field, they've seen what's going on out there, and they know where some of those gaps that we can fill are. Additionally, because we have a diverse group coming in, they bring different experiences and they think about nutrition in a little bit different way than the traditional dietetic students, which has brought a wonderful dialogue to the classroom. And we've been really impressed with some of the projects that they've come up with, some of the ideas they have, really thinking outside of the box. And I think that's a risk with any program, right? If you have everybody coming in with the same degree, and a lot of them coming in from the same or similar schools, you have that same thought process. And so we've really seen diversity of thought, and I think that's one of the best things that's coming into the program. Also, it's bringing in a variety of students. We have students who are interested in nutrition and the food service aspect because they have a culinary arts degree, and then we have students who are interested in performance because they have an exercise physiology degree. And then we have some students that are interested in critical care nutrition because they went the nutrition path. So I think it really opens it up. I would also highlight that this has allowed us to have the largest recruiting pool that we've had since opening this program compared to what we were getting with our internship. And historically, the dietetic internships are competing very heavily for applicants, and they're just not filling. So just by virtue of the fact that we've been able to fill the last 2 cohorts, I think that speaks volumes for the new program.
Right. I mean, recruiting, what was up? I can't remember the exact percentage. What was it?
Yeah, so we did go to DICAS this year.
Right.
So DICAS is like that centralized application process. We haven't done that for about 10 years. I think that really helped. Obviously, the podcast also helped, and just kind of getting our message out there, just being a little bit more strategic with our marketing. But we went from an average of getting 20 to 30 applicants to over 40 applicants. But I would say our touch points in terms of like our virtual tours, the podcast bringing people in, this idea of this future education or this reorganized model that's competency focused, I would say our amount of people that have reached out to our program is probably 300 times what it was in the past.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so the podcast is working, the recruiting's working. We're, social media, what is it, at Military Nutrition on Instagram. And then just opening up that aperture, because that's one thing I've seen too that's been so exciting with the students is that prior service. Now, not only just students at universities, but if you're a soldier listening to this and you're completing your degree or finishing up your degree on your own, you can get those prerequisites and come into our program. Because as you mentioned, half our class now, prior service.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the gems that a lot of people don't realize is if they are soldiers serving on active duty, that we do offer tuition assistance for those 27 credits that they need. So that's as simple as contacting our program. We'll get them the documentation that they need. They can go to their TA office and let them know that they're interested in the program. They're planning to put their application in, and we'll tell them what those classes are. So that's been a big plus as well as we can get those people in. And I think there are a lot of people in the military who are passionate about fitness, passionate about nutrition. They just aren't quite sure how to get there, so they come in under these other jobs for the military, but they still have this passion. And so I think we're really starting to see that transition of those individuals who have a passion to serve, but are also interested in nutrition and fitness. And so this is a great way for them to merge and then continue to bring their skill set to the Army and move the Army forward. So I think we're seeing a lot more people that have just this passion to serve and in nutrition and exercise come in. And by opening up that aperture, we've allowed them that opportunity so they don't have to do a whole military career and then try to come back. Or they don't have to get out and then try to come back. So I think that's also been something that's really helped.
No, and you talked about passion, and I want to take a step back. Your passion. What brought you in the military? Can you talk a little bit about your background and why did you decide to serve, your Army story?
Oh, sure. It's not a very interesting one, or maybe it is. So I grew up in a very rural part of New Mexico. We had one school, right, one high school, and at some point I decided I wanted to go to college, and we have a school in New Mexico, which is New Mexico Military Institute, and it's a college preparatory school. So I said, well, let me do the application. My parents said, well, if you apply and you get in and you can get a scholarship, you can go. So I actually applied and got in and got a scholarship. So I did my last 2 years of high school at New Mexico Military Institute, and it's very much focused on, the Army discipline. You have to do junior ROTC, but also very heavily focused on academics. However, I graduated from there and I said, oh, I am sick and tired of shining my brass. Back then we had BDUs and we had boots. I don't want to shine my boots. I'm going to go to a public university. And I did. I went to University of New Mexico and did my degree in nutrition. Well, I needed to do an internship. I was also dating someone who was currently serving. I loved going to the events, being part of that Army experience with him. And so I looked out there, and at the time, the Army, the Air Force, and another one in San Francisco piqued my interest. So I did my application, and at the time we had matching. So I matched with the Army. So I became, I was normal citizen one day, Army officer the next, and my now husband actually commissioned me on May 5th of 2004 into the Army. So then I joined, and I showed up here at Fort Sam Houston, and I remember signing my first contract. It was for 3 years. My little hand was shaking. I thought, oh my God, what am I doing?
That's the commitment.
Yeah, it's a commitment. And then went to Walter Reed and just absolutely loved it. Loved my family, right? So the military became my family. My husband was deployed at the time, but my cohort, my classmates, they were motivating. We all worked together. Obviously, this is 2004, so that's the height of the Iraq-Afghanistan wars. Vehicle-borne IEDs was a huge thing. So my first ward that I was assigned to was actually Ward 56, which was the amputee ward at the time, the old Walter Reed. And so, seeing those soldiers come back, seeing their motivation to get better, seeing their motivation to continue to serve, made me want to be a part of that experience. As I said, my husband was also deployed at the time, and so he was in Iraq at that time, and his guys were coming back injured. And so I was part of that experience too, part of the family support groups, and just realized that there was a bigger purpose. When you're serving, it's not just being a dietitian, it's being a soldier, it's helping those soldiers to return to fitness. So that kind of started my career, and then I took my next assignment back to Fort Bliss, Texas. That was home for me. That's 60 miles from my hometown. Nobody wanted to go there.
You didn't have to fight anybody for that assignment. You didn't have to.
Exactly.
I want to go to Fort Bliss. No, I want to go. No.
Yeah, it ended up being a wonderful assignment. So I was an outpatient dietitian there. Unfortunately, the other military dietitians were deployed. We had Katrina during that time, so we had a lot of patients come to Fort Bliss, so we got to help with that humanitarian disaster. I also got the opportunity to hit airborne and air assault school while there, and then I actually assumed command there. I was the first lieutenant. They needed a company commander. I threw my name in the hat, thinking no way. Interviewed and got the job, so I served as the company commander for Charlie Medical Company, which was the students, and then Med Holds at the time. It's when our service members came back, their units were still forward, so very rewarding experience. And then, everything short-lived in the Army. They say the best places in the Army are the place you're going and the places you've been. So, of course, my next assignment was my favorite. That was at West Point, so I was the chief of nutrition. And by that point, I had surpassed my commitment, but it just seemed like it was still a great fit. I loved the camaraderie. I loved the service. From there, I did a tour in Iraq. Again, another wonderful experience. So I had completed my master's in public health. So although I'm a registered dietitian, I did my master's degree in public health with an emphasis on global health and infectious disease. So then going into Iraq and being able to apply those skills as well as taking care of the soldiers, was just an amazing experience.
Was it Mosul or Tikrit? Where were you?
No, I was actually down south. I was the U.S. Army Dietitian, Southern Iraq, so I was down in Talil.
Oh, Talil.
And then I traveled everything south of Baghdad. I think you were up in Baghdad, right?
I was, I was in Baghdad. Yeah, what was it the big deal? Was it leishmaniasis, or what was some of the
Yeah,
things
so we had Q fever, we had leishmaniasis, we even had chickenpox and shingles, we had mumps, measles. So it was pretty interesting to see that. But I will say, you know, just dealing with the healthcare providers there, the Iraqi healthcare providers, we were in the kind of the rehabilitation process. They're about 10 years behind at that time in nutrition. Maternal and child health didn't exist. So getting to kind of partner with them and help them to develop some services for those family members was really an amazing experience.
And that's still, and I'm trying to think, like, new captain. What's your rank? I mean,
yeah,
still new officer,
I was a
right?
new captain.
Like I mean, just to get that experience at that kind of point in your career, like, how awesome is that?
Yeah, it was amazing. So just working with the teams out there and just understanding, having that global perspective, right? And so we don't think about that. I often say I was like ahead of my time because I did the public health on top of my nutrition. Now that's a whole major in itself. You can do public health nutrition, but I chose to do it a little bit ahead of its time. So it's been amazing. Those two skill sets have really merged well, and I've used them again and again, right? So just a few years ago when I was at Walter Reed and we had Operation Afghan Refugee, or whatever they're calling it these days. I think the name's changed 3 or 4 times. Just getting to, again, work with those public health skills and support that for those people coming back has just been amazing. And I think that highlights, like, as a dietitian, you come in and you think you're only going to do nutrition, but there's really all these different jobs and all these skill sets that you learn.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to leave out, you got to do long-term health education and training. Can you talk about that process? Because that's awesome. Like,
yeah, sure. So came back from Iraq, did a couple months at West Point still, and then went on to Tripler. So actually at Tripler, I was the chief of food service operations. So I know a lot of students always say they don't want to do food service, but you know, it's been really great hearing our performance dietitians come in and say, like, food is a part of nutrition.
Yeah.
So you got to learn it all. So I actually did food service, taught me a lot of really great skills on managing people, conflict management. You know, you just really start building those skills. But I wanted to do something that would allow me to impact the nutrition field, impact the Army nutrition. So I applied for long-term health education, and I was selected to attend civilian schooling full-time. So I went to Rutgers, and I did my PhD in public health with an emphasis on health education and behavioral science. So a little bit of that psychology background. So I like to use it on my coworkers now. I'm just kidding.
No, well, and I mean, just highlighting again the opportunities, because, so, you know, if you're a student listening to this, thinking about coming to this program, you know, you were getting paid to go to school to get your doctorate at Rutgers.
Yes, exactly. So I went to school for 2.5 years. I did my PhD in 2.5 years. If I had it to do over, I would take that full 3 years.
Yeah.
But I did in 2.5 years, had wonderful, wonderful mentors. But school was my full-time job. So I went to school every day, worked in the lab, you know, did my dissertation, did my assignments, published papers. It was really an amazing experience that I don't think many other entities offer that experience.
No.
And so students, you know, military officers that take that opportunity are really set ahead of their peers. So yeah, great opportunity, and it's fully funded. And universities like that, right? It's
fully funded, and you know, I did that as well, and I think we talk about it all the time too, is like also the network. I mean, you stay in contact. I know we just talked about it yesterday, folks that were in your lab. I stay in contact with folks in my lab, and even to this day, it's helped the Army, where there's, you know, times like, hey, I know, you know, this person who's running this program. Let's see if we need a recruiter there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things, you know, the Army, the challenges in the Army is like resourcing, right? Resourcing research, resourcing all of these things. But our universities, that's what they're equipped for. So they have people, they have labs. So maintaining those relationships is so important. And then when we have these ideas and we can leverage those partnerships, I think that's really what's going to move Army and military research forward. So yeah, we have a couple of things in the works right now with obviously our university partner Baylor, and then I've also linked them up with Rutgers because they have some similar interests, and then we're a part of that research as well. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more collaboration moving forward, especially for our program that's now centrally located here, because we just need to continue to build that portfolio.
Yeah, can you talk about a little bit about that, like building the portfolio? Because one of the challenges I'm, you know, familiar with, obviously being here at the program, was San Antonio is a saturated market in terms of a lot of medical training. A lot of medical training takes place in San Antonio. So can you talk about some of the challenges you faced in building that program, how you overcame them, and then some of the opportunities you found in the surrounding area?
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely saturated. So we do have dietetic interns from UIW, USTA that we're competing with for these slots. And so one of the things we did was we looked at our curriculum and we tried to prioritize time that we would need to go out to the community when these other universities might not be in session. And then we also started to leverage some of those key partners. So for example, for our food service rotations, we looked at the area and said, okay, there are other entities that maybe not necessarily hospitals that we can leverage that are like large production areas for food service. And so we were able to meet with individuals through contacts, right? So even with our training with industry contacts, we were able to meet with some of these entities and develop these training agreements with them. Our two primary clinical sites here remain the BAMC, so Brooke Army Medical Center, and the VA. However, we are entertaining, creating some additional agreements out there. I think one of the key things that we've brought to those entities that has made us very valuable is that we strategically work with these companies to identify areas or gaps that they would like addressed that also fits with our curriculum. And so our students aren't just going out there and doing nonsense projects. The students are actually going out there and doing projects that are beneficial for these entities. So if they have, a leadership problem that they need worked, or they need certain classes revamped or built, that's what we're having our students do with the oversight of the faculty here. And I think that has brought value. Actually, I know it has, because some of the entities have actually asked to hire our students just in their free time. Just from our first year go through. So I think we're bringing that value because as a phase 2 person, in our internship, we did that. We leveraged our interns, made sure we gave projects that were useful for the hospitals that we were at, useful for the nutrition care divisions. And so we've kind of brought that also into this new program. And so it makes us a little bit more competitive in this market because we're willing to work with those entities to support and provide for them.
No, and we may be biased, but our students are awesome. One thing. And then going back to what we described, our student population, you're getting people with a lot of work experience a lot of times, a lot of leadership experience in the military, people who've deployed, people who've won championships and culinary competitions.
Exactly.
So, it's not somebody who's just looking there to consume information. They can provide it, they can provide insight, they can assimilate that information that's being provided to them and give you a very polished product that you would, maybe pay a consultant for. So yeah, I think that's been great as far as, and then the students love it too.
Yeah,
they can get behind that project.
Well, and I would highlight, our student, you noted that our students aren't the typical students. So our students range in age from 22 to 40 when they're entering our program. So yeah, huge diversity. Some of them have families already. So just that maturity of being able to organize and prioritize. I mean, we're bringing that to these entities as well.
So we're a great institute to partnership with.
Yes.
Listening to this. Looking to partner, especially in the San Antonio area, reach out to us. For the students listening to this, for the college student listening to this podcast and going, I think I want to apply to the master's program in nutrition. What advice would you give them?
The first bit of advice I would give them is to reach out to our program. Send us an email, get on our listserv. We actually have started to make our virtual tours more accessible, so we offer them every month. It's always the first Tuesday of the month right now. As we get closer to the application cycle, we offer them more frequently. This virtual tour gives like an overview of our program, but then we open that last half hour of that virtual tour up to questions. So if students are out there, they have questions, they're not sure, but they just want to learn about our program, that's a great venue. Also, if you send an email to our program and you ask for information, we'll link you up with our current students. We have current students that are really into the recruiting mission and willing to reach out, so if you just want to talk to a student. So that would be my best advice, is like reach out to us, get on our listservs. We'll start to include you in that. Also follow our podcast, follow our social media platforms. You can see what we're doing as well. And then we do subscribe to Diecast now, so if you are interested in applying, you do need to apply through Diecast, so making sure that you're going on and creating your portfolio and your profile so that you can make sure you get your application in on time.
And I'll put all the links to our Instagram, to our email in the show notes, so you can just click on those. And again, reach out, because it's great to hear from folks. And just had one of our students on, Lieutenant Zubak, and we were talking about the story, how he started talking to me 2 years before he came to this program. So it's never too early.
Yeah.
If you're a freshman and you're interested in this program, let us know now, because you can go ahead and prepare and get ready.
I would also say, if you're an older student, don't be afraid to apply.
Right.
So I know that's something that I've heard from a lot of like potential applicants is, well, my undergrad degree wasn't, my GPA wasn't that great, right? And it was 14 years ago, but it wasn't that great. My freshman year was horrible. So I always encourage them to apply, especially if they've continued to do those credits that are required to come in, because we really weigh heavily on those prerequisite credits. So if they were a 4.0 with that, and then their undergrad GPA was 14 years ago, we're still going to consider them as a candidate. There's other pieces of that application, but we don't just discredit someone because their undergrad was bad. I mean, we were all young once. It's been a few years, but we were all young once. So we do understand that as well.
Yeah, I remember vaguely, there being some distractions in college. Vaguely.
Just a few.
A few.
It only took me 5 years to get out of undergrad. I don't know what happened.
So yeah, I do think that's important to highlight is you're going to be considered holistically.
Yes.
There's letters of recommendation. There's a statement of motivation. There's this entire packet. So don't get hung up on GPA is important. You need to be able to do science.
Yes.
But there's other aspects of it.
Yes.
As well.
And then I would also say volunteer, like go out into an organization that has a dietitian, follow them around, see what they're doing, whether it's a sports dietitian or if it's a clinical dietitian, just reach out to them and see, because you want to make sure that this is a field that you are passionate about and that you want to come into, because, like I said, 66 credit hours in 24 months is tough. It's tough because you add on top of that the 1,300 hours. I mean, it's tough. But we have students that are doing it, and some of them are doing it very well. The other question I get from potential applicants is, well, I don't have a nutrition degree. How far behind am I going to be? I'm happy to say that this year what we saw with our inaugural cohort was after semester 1, they really closed that gap. So they came in and they were behind their cohort that had a 4-year degree in nutrition, but they put in the work, right? So they studied, they watched the podcast, they read the books, they met with the professor, and they closed that gap. So by semester 2, they had caught up. They were really right on track with their peers. And at that point, they closed that gap and have moved forward, some of them leading the cohort now without that primary nutrition degree.
No, that's great. And it dovetails right into like that. That's kind of what Lieutenant Zubak was talking about. He's like, that first year, he was an exercise science major, was rough, but then kind of things started clicking, and now he's in the second year and he can see the big picture. Yeah. And then the other piece of it that I think you might like is, you come in with certain topics that you're passionate about, but then when you go through the program, you find other things that you didn't even consider.
Yes.
Certain aspects of clinical nutrition or things you're like, oh, I like this. I like you probably didn't think about working with amputees.
No.
As, when you were doing your undergrad, like, hey, I want to work with amputees. But then when you got to Walter Reed and started doing it and seeing those soldiers working so hard to get back in the fight.
Exactly. Well, and it's funny because as a phase 2 and a research director for 5 years, I always laughed because the students would come there for their internship and every rotation was their favorite. So if they were an outpatient, that was their favorite rotation. They were going to be outpatient dietitian. If they were an inpatient, it was inpatient. Food service. So yeah, I would agree with that. You do see that like transition of those students as they learn about the field, because some of them are coming in with very limited knowledge about the field. Also, when we talk about dietitians in the Army, we operate at the top of our credentials. We are generalists in all areas. Some of us specialize, but we're really expected to know all those areas. And I think over and over again, we outperform our peers in a lot of cases when it comes to the diversity, plugging and playing and moving us into different locations. Right.
Well, I mean, it kind of going back to your experience in Toledo at a very young age, professionally and sometimes personally, we're put in positions that normally in the civilian sector would be a much more senior individual. Would be out there kind of operating on their own, managing people, managing resources, managing money, and with us, you can be in the Army a few years and now all of a sudden
you're in charge.
You're in charge. Run it, lead it. And that's really unique, and I don't think you get that anywhere else.
No, I would agree, especially as a dietitian. In the general sector for dietitians, typically whatever they go into right out of undergrad, that's where they stay. So if they go into long-term care, then they stay in long-term care, and it's very hard to transition to something else and build your career. So I think the Army sets you up for that. And so, even if you're planning to come in, do your internship, give your time, and then leave, I think there are so many skill sets that you learn beyond just the dietitian skill set that are applicable and will help you in your future career, whatever that might be.
Right. No, I mean, that's the thing. Everybody's Army career is going to eventually end.
It does. Right? It has to.
It's
mandatory.
It's mandatory. So that is what they do. Hey, you hear this, you might not want to be in for 20 years. You might want to come in for 5 and go do other things. But I think if you talk to folks that have done that, they still look back at their time in the military. It's very rewarding, and it sets them up for other things later in life. And then we want those people to go out and talk about how great you know, the experience was.
Well, and let's talk about how the Army's transitioned, right? So we went from our retirement, we're under the old retirement system, right? We had to do 20 years to draw our retirement, but the new generation's coming under the blended retirement system. So more of a 401k. So I think, again, this new generation of Army dietitians, they have so many more options. So if they do want to come and do their time, they're still building that retirement, and then they can go somewhere else. And I think we have to be okay with that, because we want people to come in, we want them to love serving, we want them to serve for as long as they're passionate about it. We also have options for them to go into the reserves, you know. At times I get jealous of the reserve dietitians. I feel like they get a lot of the great missions that I would love to go on. So, you know, there's always that opportunity as well when people are exiting service if they choose not to stay on active duty. We have 2 wonderful reserve dietitians who teach into our program that we're so grateful for. But I think there are just so many opportunities moving forward, and the Army has really transitioned with that as well, with the blended retirement and then other opportunities.
Yeah, bottom line, it's a great time to be an Army dietitian.
Yeah.
Joetta, thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. Any closing thoughts or any tidbits you want to leave the audience with?
No, just, you know, coming in, it's always a hard decision. You have to think about your family, you have to think about your future. But once you get in, if you give it a try, you might find that you just like it, and you might end up staying for 20.
Staying for 20 years.
You never know.
You never know.
Especially if you're passionate.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks again for coming on the show. Always a pleasure. Might have to do another conversation, like a part 2 to dig into other topics. But thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right.